Let's go ahead and get started. If you happen to see him jump on, you want to admit him.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. If everybody, I'm calling the town council meeting, the special meeting tonight for discussion on the budget to order at 6:02 p.m. on June 8th. If everybody can please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a quick moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you very much. All right.
Lou has joined us, Madam Chair.
Okay, so we have everybody then now. We're good. We've got everybody. All right, according to...
Apologize for being late. Had a bad connection.
That's all right. You're only a couple of minutes. We just went through the pledge and that. We are going to jump right into this. Tonight is the meeting for us to discuss and deliberate and approve of the budget resolution. So we're going to start out with public participation with a 2-minute limit, and Lou is going to keep the timer.
We have a hand up.
Kurt, okay.
Is it appropriate to make a statement now regarding to some of the public participation?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So I forgot who said this, but the quote goes, "Perception is reality." Unfortunately, the town of Tolland has been deceived, thus leaving the reality of our budget convoluted and unclear. My household and presumably thousands of others throughout the town of Tolland received this postcard from the Tolland Democratic Town Committee. And Lisa, I have scanned this so it can be added into the meeting minutes later. While I won't address the rather macabre imagery on the front, I would like to address some of the fear-mongering disinformation on the back. The overall message of this postcard is to chide the town council into using what the Tolland Democrats refer to as the rainy day fund. And they go on to frighten residents with saying, and I quote, "Without using the rainy day fund, council is considering cuts to public safety, business development, tax relief for seniors, tech support for the students." This perception of the town council simply isn't reality. It's dishonest to claim that the town council is considering cuts to public safety, when in fact the pre-COVID budget and the current town manager's budget have no reductions in police and actually add an additional firefighter/EMT. Business development. Well, the current Economic Development Commission has a tiny budget of $6,001, which nobody is interested in cutting. Tax relief for seniors. The Senior Tax Relief Program is codified as a town ordinance and is determined by a senior's income solely and is independent of what is in our budget or not. And finally, tech support for students. This is a very important item. Unfortunately, this item is in the Board of Education's budget, and any considerations to cut this item would be coming from them and not the town council. With this much ambiguous and deceitful information, it is abundantly clear this postcard is intended to spread fear and raise the ire of citizens who had their right to vote in a referendum stolen from them by the governor of Connecticut. This postcard will try to skew your perception of the budget, conveniently left out the reality of it. The reality is the majority of councilors have been calling for a 0% mill rate increase since the start of the pandemic. This postcard skips the reality that the Board of Ed, superintendent, and town manager have been working tirelessly to use overages in our budget this year due to the pandemic to pre-purchase items for the future budget so we can lower the burden to taxpayers while keeping the services we have always had. The perception is we need to use our rainy day fund. The reality is the town manager's proposed budget calls for $600,000 to be spent from the town's unassigned reserve fund to keep taxes at zero. This is the reality of what is going on at the town council level. This is the reality when it comes to our budget. I plead with residents of Tolland, stay involved, send us your emails with questions or concerns, attend these virtual meetings to make your voice known, and understand the reality of the town budget, and do not let your perception be distorted by this partisan drivel. Thank you, Tammy.
No problem. So with that, there was an email a couple of minutes ago from the Tallinn Democratic Town Committee asking to be read into the minutes. We don't have correspondence today. We only have public participation, but it's probably, if anybody wants to read that into the record, you can go ahead.
Sure,
and-
this is Brenda Falusi. I'm reading an email that we received today. Residents of Tallinn and Town Council members, we, the leadership of the Tallinn Democratic Town Committee, wish to respond to comments made by the chairperson of the Town Council, Ms. Tammy Nuccio, regarding our recent mailer. Ms. Nuccio has sent responses to residents accusing our recent mailing as misinformation. Our mission was developed based on budget information published for the 2020-2021 fiscal year on the Town of Tallinn's webpage, www.tallinn.org. Perhaps the chairperson's confusion is in regard to what a reduction in service means. Merriam-Webster defines the words reduce as to diminish in size, amount, extent, or number, and service as contribution to the welfare of others. Therefore, any diminishment contribution to the welfare of others is a reduction in service. When the Town Council considers cutting funding to items in the town budget, they are considering a reduction in service to the residents in town. Items in the current budget being considered by the Town Council include reductions in funding of public safety services, economic development services, tax relief for seniors, and technology support for students. If the council, through the voice of the chairperson, does not correct the characterization of the fact as misinformation, then the council is lying to the residents of Tallinn. I hope the council takes the time to carefully review the budget and the impact of any and all reductions on the residents of Tallinn. We, the leadership of the Tallinn Democratic Town Committee, urge the council to pass a budget that has no rate increases and, using some of the rainy day funds, continues to fund all services provided by the town at the same level as the current fiscal year. Thank you. Signed, Katie Murray, Chair of the Tallinn Democratic Town Committee, Jason Philbin, the Vice Chair, Madhu Rendu-Chinchala, Treasurer, and Elizabeth Costa, Secretary.
Hey, Lou, your hand is up. Do you want to talk about something for public participation, or do we want to just deal with any other comments when we get to our deliberation period? And
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll reserve my comments regarding the response until we discuss the budget itself. I'd like to move with the public participation, please. Thank you.
I agree, and I will call on you first when we get to that point. Is there anybody that would like to publicly participate for a limit of 2 minutes on the topic on the agenda, which is the discussion in our consideration of the proposed budget? Okay, going once, going twice. All right. No public participation. All right, that gets us to consideration of the Town Council proposed full year 2020-2021 budget. So this is where we have seen Mike's budget. We have had our joint meeting with the Town Council. We have sat and talked to all of the department heads. And unfortunately, the way that the cards crumble is tonight we have to decide what the final budget is going to be. So this is where we get to talk about it and deliberate. And then we will approve of the resolution on what the budget will be set at. So with that in mind, Lou, I'm going to go ahead and let you have your comments. And then I have an opening comment, and then we can go from there. So go ahead, Lou.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I respectfully disagree with the and find it strange, the response that was sent forward by the TDTC in their letter, which we would like to note was received, I think, approximately 15 minutes before this meeting was due to begin. So I didn't have a chance to fully digest it or form a fully coherent response to it. I think that going in and after being called out on some of the inaccuracies that were contained inside there, that they came back with a definition from the dictionary, picking out that any minuscule change or diminution of the overall budget would be considered a reduction, which I find disingenuous, and I think that that it speaks volumes regarding their position. And I would also like to point out that in the response that and I've responded to many of our residents who have emailed me, and that in their response that they say that there are these proposed cuts, but fail to state what cuts are being proposed, where they're located, anything along those lines. Just simply pointing out to this is where the budget is, and this is where and this is what it says without clear reference as far as what it says. So I find it disingenuous. That being said, I would like to move on with the further discussion of the budget, since that's really what we're here for. Thank you.
You're welcome. As far as like a general statement, I absolutely did reply back to every single email saying that it was misinformation. Doing this for a living, it's very easy to pick a number and say, hey, look at this one number without looking at the budget. And also not take into consideration the fact that both the Board of Ed and the town side had money available at the end of this year because of COVID that we have used to purposefully reduce the budget numbers for next year while still maintaining the service levels and buying the things that were in the budget early. So it's not a reduction of service in quite literally any shape or form. But just to kind of go over and get a clear view on that, what was it? The public safety. Mike, I know everybody's on the phone here, but have we, first of all, council hasn't done any considering yet. That's what tonight is for. The budget, what that was proposed was the town manager's recommended budget. We are considering tonight what we are going to do with the budget. So it's premature, but more importantly, on a public safety level, are we cutting services on a public safety level?
So hi, everybody. Mike Rosen, town manager. And I obviously have been listening to the conversation up to this point. We do have, just for the record, we have many of the town's department heads and staff are on the line right now. So if we need to delve into this deeper, I know Chief Lytle is here too. But I can say that in the May 26th packet that we put forward, that the list of one-time reductions is spelled out in all of the departments. We had thoughtfully reached out to all the department heads and asked them to, put forward to consider what might not be happening next year on a one-time basis due to COVID-19. So in the public safety department, I have the list up in front of me. There's a couple of things on the list that are going to be one-time reductions, and also possibly, like Tammy had said, might be future. They might have been purchases made in this year to offset next year's budget. So just for example, in the ambulance account, there's a communications decrease of $5,839. It's a reduction in the 911 fee that we had received a better rate, a more favorable rate than we had anticipated. The office machines, there's a projector, a portable projector that was slated to be replaced next year. And we actually did reduce it on a one-time basis because the old one's going to work for another year. So we took that out of the budget. So again, not necessarily a decrease because there's still a working projector, but we did remove the new one from the budget for this year. CPR and medical bag replacements, that was an example of where we're going to try to buy. And I believe the chief, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we are going to buy one of those bags this year due to savings and take it out of next year's budget. So therefore, it's an almost $2,500 savings next year. And then finally, fuel and oil, there was, due to the favorable rate, there was a reduction in the diesel rate that we were able to realize those benefits. So that was the ambulance account. There was also animal control. There was a reduced radio cost in fire prevention, vehicle repair. We are going to try to get the vehicle online sooner than we expected. And there's also some changes to fire suppression that have to do with, again, reduced 911 fee. They removed one fire training class, removed the fire apparatus foam, and they're going to buy it this year instead of next year. They reduced the diesel rate, and they also got some savings due to in the capital budget this year, we have those self-contained breathing apparatus that are going to be paid for using the ambulance fund. And there's a reduction of $1,700 because there's going to be new equipment, and you can decrease the testing cost because they're brand new. You don't need to test them. So that's the only changes to public safety. Sorry to be so thorough, but that's what we're in the cuts list.
No, I think at this time we have to be thorough to have the information. So we're not cutting any services. And actually, aren't we adding a headcount to public
Correct.
safety?
So in this budget as proposed, there's going to be a 7th firefighter EMT that's supposed to go online April 1st, 2021. So we are adding a firefighter position, but we are offsetting that with the town engineer position. We're not hiring a full-time engineer. So the overall headcount of the town zeroes out.
Yeah. And from a business development perspective?
So that one, I think that question might be regarding under the planning department, under the cuts list, there was a $7,500 reduction for zoning regulation consultant. And I know that our director of planning, Heidi, is on the line. And if you don't mind, may I call on you to kind of share why we were able to reduce $7,500?
Sure. Heidi Samoker, Director of Planning.
Hi, Heidi.
We plan to continue implementing the Plan of Conservation Development, which requires doing a good amount of zoning work. We had requested $15,000 in next year's budget to continue that work. We were able to cut it in half with the assumption in a year from now, I'll ask for that second half the following year. So we're just stretching out what could have worked under 1 year into 2 years.
Okay, so we're still going to be working on the POCD and have the consultant, not just, okay. And the tax relief for seniors, I'm really kind of stumped on that one because tax relief for seniors is Ordinance 60. It's actually an ordinance. We don't fund it. We can't take money from it unless we change the ordinance. And I distinctly recall, actually, Lisa saying that the reason it was going from 6.5 million to 6.4 million was a change in the demographics. If people move or pass away, their house does not stay on that list. That it's an ordinance. We don't fund it. It is a direct write-off from our grand net, our list, our grant list. So that is just, I think, maybe people don't understand the budget and understand how the numbers get there. So it's definitely, I think pretty much everybody in this town knows if we were cutting senior services, I would probably want to be one of the very first people to be speaking up about that. And the tech support for students, that would fall under the Board of Ed. And after the assumptions that we have, they're going to have nearly $1 million in their ERF fund, and they are purchasing the 184 Chromebooks that Dr. Willett mentioned in his plan. With the $45,000 that we're getting from the CARES fund. So we're not cutting any support there. First of all, we can't. Second of all, it's being funded with the CARES thing. So I think that addresses the 4 things that we were supposedly considering that I guess we're considering tonight and haven't cut a single one of them. As far as the no tax increase, that's virtually impossible unless we decide we want to cut more money from the budget because we can have a no mill rate increase, but that does not equate to a no tax increase. And we have 0 service cuts in this budget, from what I understand. We have our bulky waste. We've got all the head count. We've got no services that we're cutting. And for the last piece of it, Mike, from what I understand, your original proposal, which we will be discussing tonight, has $600,000 from the fund usage in it. So
That's correct. Correct.
And that is significantly higher than what we have used in the prior years. So
True.
I think that handles that piece of it. So now I think we just jump into discussion of the proposed budget that Mike has put forward. I don't know if anybody needs that up on the screen or if we have notes that we're all working off of. So who wants to start?
Madam Chair, I'd like to be able to do a summary of the correspondence we received regarding just the budget since our last time we talked about correspondence.
Well, I don't think we have public correspondence on here, just public participation. So
It's basically public participation, and I think it goes to the discussion. If you're not going to let me do it now, I will do it later.
I don't know when you would do it if we didn't, but if you want to go ahead,
Whenever I want to discuss.
you
So
can
I'd like
bring it
to-
up, but if it's
I'd
in
like to-
relation to the postcard, I think we're going to all have the same feedback, but go ahead.
Well, this is to let anybody know who's online and all of our department heads, the correspondence that we received. By not allowing the correspondence, it's my feeling that we're ignoring the voice of the residents, and we're not sharing that information.
Well, we have public participation on this meeting today. So that's the opportunity for public participation. I don't think we're ignoring anybody at all, but go ahead and read the correspondences.
I'd like to take exception to your tone of voice. It's been very condescending for the past few minutes. I'd like to go on record as saying that.
Right back at you.
Correspondence that we received, again, this is Brenda Falusi. We received 9 emails. I did the same thing I did last time. I took the subject matters in the emails and I tallied up what the subject was about them. So it might not be a one-to-one correspondence. We received 9 emails in support of the rainy day fund, or using the rainy days fund. We received 8 emails to not cut any cost of services. We received 9 emails to no tax increase. We received 1 email for minimum tax increases. We received 1 email for minimum service cuts. We received 2 emails for not cutting any education services. We received 1 email for not using the rainy day fund. And we received 1 email in support of zero budget planning.
Okay.
So the correspondence.
So who else wants to do it? Anybody else want to discuss anything? What are we looking at here? So as the budget presented by Mike on the 2nd, again, I don't think we necessarily.
Madam Chair, I do have
Yeah.
I would really like to request a second. Well, in your prior comments, you mentioned about how there will be a tax increase, but no mill increase. And just for clarification on that, the tax increase that you're referring to are that for the people that have encountered an increase in their property tax based upon the revaluation. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah. So
But it's
basically,
not.
go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Do you have more?
I just said so that it's not that we are not asking for a tax increase, but there is one that's going to be imposed just by the matter of fact that we had a revaluation, so that the at the current mill rate that we have imposed, that it would, some people would see an increase in tax, some people would see a decrease in taxes. So that's full visibility as far as when you're saying that there's no tax increase. But there will be tax increases. It's that some people will see a tax increase, but we are not looking for a mill rate increase. Is that about accurate?
Yeah. So basically, with the revaluation, every house was evaluated, and either they went up in value, stayed the same, or went down in value. Anybody who went down in value is actually going to see a huge reduction to their taxes. Anybody who stayed flat, their taxes are going to stay flat. And anybody whose house increased in value from the revaluation will see a uptick in taxes, even if we stay at a zero mill rate. In order for us to get to a no tax increase, we would have to cut the equivalence of what was increased in the growth in the grand list, or the reduction in the grand list, I should say. So it's not a no tax increase. It is a zero mill rate increase, but certain people in town are going to see an increase.
And Madam Chair, this is Mike Rosen, Town Manager. We did say that during the budget presentation. We showed what in the low, medium, and high range of property values, what you could expect to see for your taxes next year. And also we invited people to use the calculator on the website to kind of figure out where they'd be based on their revaluation value and the 36.02 tax rate.
Yes. So, all right, John, your hand is up.
Thanks, Tammy. I just wanted to address the postcard myself briefly, and I responded, I think, to every email that we got, and the words I used to describe the postcard were misleading and factually inaccurate, and that went out to every resident who sent an email into the town council. And from what I've heard from the town manager so far tonight, I stand by those statements, but I would like to get some clarity around the use of the fund balance, because that's a pretty hot topic. So Mike, if you could explain what we've done with the fund balance and what the plan is to bring that back down to what we typically use, I think that would be helpful for a lot of people.
Sure, thank you. Mike Rosen, Town Manager, and I just want to clarify, I meant 36.02, I meant to say 36.05 mill rate from the previous statement. So right now for our budget, and this goes back to a couple of meetings where I first proposed the plan with using an example, and then finally the actual budget, and then the budget presentation on June 2nd. The plan right now is we needed to make ends meet with a no mill rate increase without changing services further than what was going to be changing due to COVID-19 because of the outstanding situation we're having with this public health emergency. So in most years, and I don't have all the numbers because this was really more part of my presentation last week, but in most years, we strive for $200,000 to $300,000 worth of fund balance usage, which is not a recurring revenue. It's just an end of year transfer from our reserve account to offset any expenditures that need to be offset at the end of the fiscal year. We generally budget between $200,000 and $300,000. It fluctuates depending on the year, depending on what's on the docket for that year. When I was putting together this plan and speaking with all the department heads, what became evident was that in order to maintain the level of service that we need to do while not increasing the mill rate, we would have to use more of the cash from the fund balance to offset that this year. And the number we chose to comfortably do was 600,000 rather than 300,000. Again, this is just an end of year transfer. So if there are savings throughout the year next year, and we don't need to use the full 600,000, we only need to use what we need to use to close the gap. So if it's 300, 400, 500,000, that's all we're going to use. We're just building in the 6 now, 100,000, so we can do our modeling and fund balance analysis, so we can see how the fund balance is going to change over the next few years, which was a slide that I had put in the presentation from last week. Right now, and again, I don't have the numbers quite in front of me, but we're on the higher end of the range of where we are with fund balance, but that's due to decrease over the next few years because of the increased usage this year. We need to sort of ease that over time. So next year, if we were to just drop from 600 back to 300, the town may see a mill rate increase because all of a sudden we're putting the burden of the taxes back onto the taxpayers. Probably the better, more prudent way to do it would be to drop from 600 to maybe 450, and maybe then the following year from 450 back to 3, or some other, those don't have to be the exact numbers, maybe 6 to 4, 4 to 3, or whatever it might be, depending on how we shake out at the end of this new fiscal year that we're going into. So the idea is to pad it in over a few years. Otherwise, the brunt of it is felt all at once by the taxpayers. They basically have to bring the level of revenue back up to meet where we're at now with the $600,000 built in. So we don't want to do that because then there would be sort of a spike in the tax rate. We'd rather pad it over time. So that's just sort of the high level view of what we're doing. We are peppering in more fund balance than we normally do, but again, it doesn't have to. We don't need to put that revenue unless we truly have the expenditures at the end of the year. We just try to put together a budget as staff that adhere to your guidance to have a no mill rate increase while not changing services outside of what's going to be impacted due to COVID-19. I hope that answers your question, John. And I know Lisa's on the phone too, in case we need to go deeper.
Oh, it does. Thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else have anything they want to ask any specific questions on?
Madam Chair, this is Lulu, if I may.
Yep.
Mike, just a quick question regarding the information that you just went over for John. Now, that based upon the revenue that we'll be drawing, I believe it's a $600,000 proposal, that we would be naturally looking at basically a tax increase no matter what. We'd be starting out, I think, somewhere between 1.3 and 1.5 percent increase next year, just by the mere fact that we're taking this $600,000 though. I mean, I'm just going by my basic calculations. I don't know if either you or if Lisa could correct me on that. I just want to make sure that I'm clear on that issue.
So if you use more fund balance than, so one of my slides in my last presentation talked about
Right.
how we do every year, and most communities do this, build in some usage of reserves in order to make sure revenues equal expenditures. What we're doing this year by basically doubling the amount of fund balance usage is, as you said, we're kind of creating a larger gap for ourselves next year, that we have to start the year off with however much fund balance that we had layered in this year, plus whatever we lose on grand list value due to crumbling foundations. If there's any further appropriation away, reallocation of ERF funding, or sorry, not ERF, the education ECS funding, these are other revenue streams that are reducing. So whatever revenue we need that is reducing, we need to offset either by expenditure reduction or revenue increase. And generally it's the tax revenue that we rely upon. As I showed in my last presentation, we're about 80% reliant on property taxes to pay our bills here. So if the 600,000 fund balance plus the $300 or so thousand in ECS funding, plus whatever potential crumbling foundation loss of property value, that's sort of your, and plus whatever else might happen throughout the year. That's sort of your beginning of the year gap that you have to make up by the end of the year. What you can make, throughout the year, there may be things that go towards your favor. There may be savings. There may be better contract values. There may be wage savings from somebody who may retire and then hiring somebody that doesn't come in at the same rate as the person who retired. Or you may have a gap in hiring for a few months and you save that salary cost. All of that builds up throughout the year and starts going towards that, let's say, $1 million, as you said, Lou. But then by the time you get to March, April, May, now in the next fiscal year, now you're starting to say, gee, how much fund balance do I need to make this year work? Is it the initial amount, the 600,000? Or is it less due to savings or due to things that aren't happening because of coronavirus? So in theory, the gap can be partially made up throughout the year due to savings or due to changes in the budget. They can go favorably or unfavorably. You may find yourself in a worse situation than you expected, which is why you want to have some wiggle room in the fund balance, that should you need to use more than you expected, you want to have that leeway. So that's sort of my thoughts on it. I look to Lisa, though. Can you verify it's about 1.5%? My rough math is about $1 million or so. I'm sorry, you're still muted, Lisa.
Sorry, I was on mute. Sorry. I don't have the percentage off the top of my head, and I don't want to give misinformation out, but Tammy does.
How do you know that, Lisa? So actually, this was like one of my questions when we're looking at the overall budget and the fund usage. We're talking about, like, if you look at the documents that Mike passed out to the town council last time around, we're looking at a 0.7% expense increase this year. And we are funding that through usage of the fund. So one of my concerns on this, and I just want to make sure everybody is wholly aware and cognizant of the fact that this 0.7, if we put the budget through exactly as Mike requested right now, this 0.7 becomes the immediate hole that we're in next year, because these are an increase in expenses. So we would have to find a way to continue to fund them next year, especially if you're looking at a Board of Ed budget, because the budget can't go down unless you adjust it for MBR. So it's an automatic uptick. And then there are things that we know already are going to happen next year. For instance, the Board of Ed, Dr. Willett's presentation showed $147,000 of items that would need to be added back to the budget next year. The EMT that we're adding, we would need to add the delta of the 1 quarter to the full year. The Vernon Sewer project, we know the capital projects are going to go up by about $160,000 from what Mike has in this budget to what we're expecting for next year. And we also have the $150,000 increase in our debt due to Birch Grove. And when you add all of those things in, we're looking at about a 1.5 to maybe a little bit higher-ish increase. So the 0.7 plus all of these things, that's our open the door on July 1st when we start looking at the budget. So what we're doing, just so everybody is fully cognizant and aware, what we're doing is borrowing from Peter to pay Paul this year. You know, we're taking money out of the fund to float this 0.7% expense increase, knowing that next year we are going to have to fully fund that 0.7 plus, and that doesn't even get us into the knowns after. That doesn't get us into like contracts and any change in insurance or anything like that. This is just the absolute 100%. You cannot dispute any one of those things, knowns. So that was one of the questions that I had, was kind of like, how much of a hole are we going into next year? And are we all okay with that hole? So while it would be a 0 mill rate increase this year, it's really probably about a 1.3 to a 1.5% increase that we're just kind of pushing down the road.
And to be fair, this is Mike Rosen too. To be fair, I mean, we're trying to, you know, you gave us the goal to get a no mill rate increase, but understanding that in the future years, these things may come back online, or we need to budget again for these expenses that need to come back. So we're not saying we want to just automatically put, you know, a 2 years worth of mill rate increases into the next fiscal year, because I don't think that would pass referendum necessarily unless people understood exactly what we were putting back into the budget. I think it's more that we don't want there to be sticker shock.
Absolutely.
So we do anticipate having to put these things back in, and maybe still using a little bit more fund balance next year to also help offset the mill rate spike next year. And then perhaps in 2 years' time, we can layer it down back to our normal level. That was the thought that went into this. But a lot of these things do need to come back after the COVID-19 emergency is over.
Absolutely. And then, you know, we have to try to figure out if there's anything additional that's going to come into play that we're going to have to account for next year. This is just today assumption. That's where we're at. Might be very different of a landscape after everybody starts going back to work and to school and such.
Right. The economy might be better, things like that.
Right. So the first thing that I would like to kind of propose, unless anybody else has anything before. Oh, yep, Steve.
Steve Jones. Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry I can't be on camera tonight. The laptop decided it wanted an update that would have taken an hour to do, so I can't be on camera. So I just deferred to being able to speak verbally than be visual. I just had 3 questions I wanted to ask, but first wanted to provide some thanks and some appreciation to the staff for really kind of doing a really tough job through a tough year to meet these budget goals. And it's not easy, and it's certainly a tough situation to be in right now. So my first question was potentially to Barbara regarding any lost revenue or changes in the flow of business for the library in the past couple of months, and if she foresees any changes in anticipated revenue to the library as they slowly begin that kind of phased reopening.
It doesn't matter. You know, it's
I thought I heard Barbara, but did she?
No,
Barbara, I believe you're muted.
Yep.
You're muted at the moment. Oh, there you go.
So yes, typically we would be gathering fines, and we're not, because we're not open, and we also are not charging overdue fees from the start of March 16th, the start of the COVID period, until we reopen. I think that's only the fair thing to do at this point.
Okay, thank you. My second question was going to be the public works. I was just curious if there's been any changes or improvements in efficiency in the past couple of months with fewer people commuting to work and probably fewer school buses on the roadways, if that's helped or made any difference in terms of some of our major projects around town.
It's if anything, it has helped us do them quicker just because of the lack of traffic, such as a project we did at the tennis courts on Old Cat Hole Road. We had some new basins that we put in over there. We also did, like I say, the drainage project at the tennis courts. With limited traffic, it makes it much easier for our crews to get in and out. But as far as seeing any real difference in, we'll say, the life of a road, that's a minimal amount of traffic difference. It would take years of that before we could say, yeah, we actually extended the life of the road for, by 2 years or whatever.
Okay. And have there been any impacts or improvements perchance to the greens, like the parks and grassy areas, or are there any changes expected for the summer in terms of regular maintenance? I know it's kind of a sketchy time right now in terms of when we're going to fully reopen for things like baseball and other recreational activities on those fields.
Yeah, we believe it or not, we're still out there. We're mowing the fields. We actually have to go out and line the fields, even though they're not being regularly used, because if we let the lines disappear, it takes us quite a while to
find them again.
What's that?
To find them again.
Yeah, it takes forever to reset up a field. You have to pull all the pins, and it's much easier to go out there and just mark them. Along with the fact that there are people, whether it be families or groups, that are still going out into the fields just to get some exercise.
Okay, thank you. And then my third question was just going to be towards human services, if Bev's available. I was just curious how you guys have been weathering these past couple of months and how you foresee the next few months with our current proposed budget, being able to help families in need and provide that assistance. I know that it's very difficult to kind of foresee what the economic changes are going to be, how we're going to be with employment and the need for food assistance, but I just wanted to kind of get the public or human services perspective on how things have been going and what we kind of could expect for the next few months.
Since we haven't had any reduction in staff and everybody is working full time, we've been able to assist our clients through the entitlement renter rebate, the fuel assistance program, any other entitlement programs. And Tallinn is an extremely generous community, and we've been receiving donations that help offset some costs for families, as well as the food bank. So I think we are okay to be able to perform those services.
Okay. And actually, sorry, I have one fourth question, Tammy. My apologies. I said three, but I came up with a fourth in the process based on some comments. And this might be directed to either Mike or Lisa. So through you, was there any update on the possibility of getting any financial reimbursement or grants, federal or state? I know it was previously discussed for not laying off any of our currently employed town staff. I'd heard, I can't recall when it was mentioned, but I thought there was some idea being floated around that we would be able to get a grant because other towns were laying off staff, and we made a purposeful point of not doing so.
Lisa, I believe you were on a call earlier today. Did they address that on the OPM call?
They did not address that, but from my understanding, we are not eligible for those programs like the private businesses get for keeping employees working. So from my understanding, we won't get any type of grant for that. But I was on the phone with OPM today, and there is a program through the CARES Act that is going to provide some funding for municipalities. And basically what we'll have to do is we need to exhaust all our other areas of funding, such as FEMA. There's some educational grants out there for the whole COVID situation. And once we get the denials or whatever's considered ineligible, then we can submit to the state OPM to try to get those funds back to the town. So maybe the 25% share of the FEMA part that we have to pay, that more than likely will be reimbursed through this other program.
Okay, and so that a little disappointing, but understood. And I think, you know, we as a council did the right thing from kind of a ethical and kind of good governance standpoint by opting not to consider any furloughs or layoffs. And I'm actually really glad that it seems from past meetings that overall all the departments that have the opportunity to work from home have done a really good job of having that transition to keep people safe and still employed fully. So that concludes my comments and questions, Councilman Miccio. So I'll defer my comments to the next available person.
Thank you. Cassandra?
Thank you, Tammy. It's Cassandra York. Actually, my question's sort of directed mostly to Mike Rosen, town manager. So I guess the big elephant in the room here is that we are dealing in some incredibly unprecedented times, and we're forecasting for something that we hope will happen, but may not happen whatsoever, considering the climate that we're in right now and all the changes that are going on. My question to Mike, though, is there anything that he may have thought of, and this is only possibly just a speculation, that could come up that we may not, A, get funding for, or that could be an unanticipated expense that could put us in a tough spot next year that may even require us to have more use of our fund balance and or a greater tax increase? Anything that may have happened, and this is again just a speculation, but just to be aware that, you know, we are in there's some really crazy times right now.
Interesting question. This is Mike Rosen, town manager. I'd be a little bit hesitant to speculate too far with this. I think the only thing maybe that I've gotten sort of just cursory maybe indication is that with state aid. So we did receive our state aid for town aid roads and local capital improvement program last year. Or it was a few months ago, but it was to go towards this current year's budget. We don't know what's going to happen next year with that, and if the state's in a bad shape, then they may not give the money to municipalities that we're used to. Obviously, there are other big state aid pockets, such as ECS funding, that we're not, obviously we're not sure what's going to happen with that, although I haven't heard anything specifically that there are going to be any reductions to that. So I do believe that they're going to make good, the state is going to make good on the ECS that we were expecting for this coming fiscal year, but we don't know what the next step after that's going to be. So I guess as I showed in my presentation last week, there is a town reliance on state aid in the tune to about 16 to 17% of our overall revenue stream in town. So it's something that's significant, and that would probably be the biggest chunk if we had to dip into further fund balance, would be if it was making up some sort of a gap that we did not receive as much as we had expected. There may be smaller streams here and there, more relevant to the departments that interact face-to-face with the public, or have services that they do that are more of a face-to-face nature, such as library, recreation. I'm trying to think. There's other, maybe even probate to some degree, but without having face-to-face interactions, that may change the budget significantly throughout the year. We may either see more savings, or depending on what ideas we come up with to creatively fix the problems, we may have to use fund balance. But I think the biggest one is state aid, and then also just keeping an eye on the collection rate. So I know to date we didn't send the tax bills out yet. Obviously, that still hinges on what happens at tonight's meeting and then the next couple of meetings. But when we send the tax bills out, Lisa and I and everybody, the collector, Michelle, we're not sure what kind of a collection rate we're going to receive. We're still anticipating the 99% that we've always had, or at least recently have had, but that may not be accurate. And we may find ourselves with a bit of a shortfall. if that's the case. We do have the deferral program that we offered. We've had a couple of applicants, but not overwhelmingly amount. That deadline is July 1st to apply for the deferral program if you're somebody who's affected by COVID-19. But there are people that at this point, we've put the message out a few times, but there are people who may still not have gotten the message that that program is eligible, and they may just skip or miss a tax payment. And I'm just a little bit nervous about the collection rate, although I do think all signs are good that we should still stay in that 99% range. So I think those are the two big ones, the state aid and the collection rate.
Thank you, Mike. Perfect.
Sure.
Thank you.
Brenda?
Hi, this is Brenda Felucci. I have a number of questions to go through. First of all, I want to make the comment that I'm pretty disappointed that we are reducing people, our staff, and Birch Grove to just expenses and liabilities. They're assets to our community. They're our investment in our community. They provide the services and the location that we need in order to, grow and to learn, to recreate, things like that. Each of the people that we have that is employed by the town is an asset. They all help us with our programs. They're all the people that we interact with on a daily basis. And without these town employees, Tallinn just wouldn't be the same place that it is. I received lots of emails and text messages thanking the senior center and the library for everything that they've done with their connections. A lot of people told me that they've been receiving phone calls as outreach, and they're really appreciative of that. I was a little worried about, with the senior center being closed, and I had asked a question last time we met about how our outreach is going to the elderly. And we have a number of programs here. I know many of them are state funded, like the circuit breaker, the renter's rebate, the winter heat assistance, Operation Fuel, the dial-a-ride, things like that. But maybe we can talk a little bit about how we see, without the senior center being open, how do we foresee the future to look like to our seniors or the people who need those kind of services? We're looking at quite a long time without a vaccine, possibly. So I don't know if we can ask Bev about that. I know she'll have to unmute.
Thank you. This is Bev Bellady, Director of Human Services. That is, the questions you're asking are the same ones I struggle with and have reached out to other towns as well. Any entitlement program we have been doing and contacting our clients and doing them through scanning documents. So that part of it hasn't stopped. And I know Fran and Becky, the Senior Center Director, have been calling people obviously daily, weekly, and so has Nancy Dunn, myself, and Jean Pitney. I struggle with what the future is going to look like and when we can open the senior center as well. And I have been looking for guidance from the health department. I can't say that I have any answers. I wish it was sooner.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I received, like I said, I received lots of positive feedback for the amount of outreach. I had a question. A lot of people asked me about this for the senior tax relief that was listed. For the year 18-19, it was listed at 7.3 million, then 19-20, 6.5, and then the year after that, what we're budgeting next is 6.4 million. Is that both Ordinance 25 and Ordinance 60, or is it just Ordinance 60?
That I don't know. Jason may have an answer to that one, Mike. Is he on?
I'm on.
Our tax
He
assessor?
was able to, oh, he is here. Sorry.
Okay.
Ordinance 25, I'm not exactly sure what that is, to be honest with you. Ordinance 60 is the freeze program, which I think makes up all of that total. What has happened this year is that applications were waived. So anybody that qualified in 2017 who was due for a re-up this year automatically qualifies. So they don't have to re-up for 2 years, which means that we won't lose anybody from the program unless they pass on. Nobody will be over income because nobody has to file. If somebody has already filed and they happen to be over income for that program, then we may lose them. However, it's going to be minimal. And realistically, the numbers from this year to next year may increase slightly because we won't lose anybody. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have my numbers in front of me in my worksheet that I use with Lisa, but that 6.5 number sounds like the number for just the freeze program.
Okay. I had listed just in my notes that ordinance 25 was a tax deferment for low income. I didn't print it out. And these were just emails sent to me by a number of residents.
We don't have a lot of deferrals.
Okay.
And those are all paid back anyway.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So in the veterans tax, well, for these ordinance 25, ordinance 60, veterans tax relief, besides the town manager's report, the Senior Center newsletter, where else, and when people call for services, if they have a need, where else can people find out about this information? You know, unfortunately, during this pandemic, the people that are not receiving information are anybody that, you know, is technology inhibited. You know, normally I guess they would see things maybe at the town hall or at the library, but is there another way that we're reaching the people not on technology?
We had sent out in the spring newsletter through the rec department. But we don't post anything in the paper unless it's mandatory. And maybe that's something we could do because the cost isn't that high. But we did, you know, put it on the main page of the website with, I know it's not called a blast anymore, but put it out there as a headline banner. And also on the assessor's page, obviously if people don't have the internet, then it's going to be word of mouth, I guess.
And Brenda, it's Beverly Bellady again. We put in our senior newsletter, and everybody who comes through our door for whatever program, we screen them. And if it's not during that time period, we have a huge spreadsheet. We call people. So we try to keep track of anybody who may be eligible for any program. And then we try to follow up.
The flyer, I believe, goes to every household in Tallinn too. So.
Right, I believe that flyer came out prior to COVID, so I didn't know if there would be, you know, new people who may be fiscally impacted, who, you know, may not have saved that information or are unaware of it. So that's why I believe people were asking me about this. So a couple other things. It was pointed out to me by a number of people that Mr. Rosen's new budget that started does not mention anywhere about the current health pandemic. I mean, we all assume that this was a response to it, but nowhere in it does it mention COVID or the virus or, you know, the situation that we're in right now specifically. So I had a number of people asking me, where are we paying for things like the sneeze shields? Where are we paying for the signage in the town hall, the changes in the library, the cleaning on the town side? They'd like to know where that's coming out of in the budget. And
sure. Sorry.
Also, how is it, you know, the next 18 months, how are those things being paid for?
Sure. Hi, Mike Rosen, Town Manager. So I actually did receive an email like that earlier today, and I did reply to that person directly too. The updated budget was in the May 26th packet, where there was the list. There was a couple of things. There was Town Manager's budget memo, Town Manager's budget message, revised budget book pages, and the fund balance analysis from the Finance Director. And those are the materials that are going to be supplementing the materials in the final budget book after the budget is voted and finalized. So in the revised budget message, there's I think 3 or 4 mentions of COVID. There's also in the memo preceding the list of reductions, there was obviously mentions of COVID in that too. So I mean, in every presentation I've given, of course, I've mentioned COVID. So
Right.
I mean, it is out there, but I did speak to that resident, and I think we did share it on the town website as well. So that's out there. And then all the expenses that we've been charging, including the germ guards, the cleaning. We've put some of the Zoom licenses, and I'm trying to think if there's any other major things. Signage, we haven't really done too much formal signage yet at Town Hall. We've put some paper signs up on the wall, the windows, so that people know that we're closed. But eventually, we're going to have 6 feet stickers and probably some more plastic barriers, and similar to the supermarkets. So those are being funded right now out of that declaration fund, the emergency declaration fund, of which a few months ago the council had changed that from the I forgot what the original name was, just like the fund, and then they made it the emergency declaration fund. So we do have a balance in that still, and we're charging things to that fund. And the intent is when we get reimbursed from FEMA or whatever organization, whether it's FEMA or the state or whoever, we will replenish that with the 75%, hopefully the 100% reimbursement rate. So it's a direct one-to-one. But I've been sort of following the state in what's going to be reimbursable. And I'm hearing that sort of auxiliary operating costs, such as Zoom licenses or laptop purchases that may have been made so people can work from home, will not be eventually eligible expenses. But there are certainly a lot of things that are eligible expenses. So we've been tracking, we've been applying to the state. Lisa's been doing a great job, and also been interacting with the departments to make sure everybody is keeping up to date with their hours, and making sure that everything that's properly being charged against the declaration fund, in the hopes that it will be replenished down the line.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
The next questions I have is we have a number of new committees that are possibly coming up, or a task force, depending on how we go ahead with these. There's a concern that there's not any budget items for these, that, funding and grants might not be available. So how would we go ahead? And this is probably the same answer we had when we did the committee for people with disabilities. How would we ensure that they have the funds and resources needed if we do move ahead with these committees?
I guess I'll take that. This is Mike, the town manager, and if anybody else wants to chime in, please feel free. I guess we need to get these up and running and established. So I don't have a good answer at the moment, because in this budget, like you said, they're not budgeted in to be part of committee expenses. Obviously, anything with printing or sort of administrative, putting agendas up or putting minutes up, that's mostly coordinated through the town manager's office anyway, at no additional cost. We have a great cadre of people in the manager's office that do that. So I don't know if there's going to be physical expenses where people may need to do, I'm thinking printing or mailings, or I'm not sure, maybe the committee itself, the commission itself may come up with what sort of a budget it may need for the next future year out. By the time the commission's established, though, it'll be the brand new, probably the fiscal year, July 1st. So they may not have a budget for next year unless we do an appropriation to make a budget for it. I'd have to talk to Lisa about how to do that. We probably would need an ordinance and a public hearing. I'd have to verify that with Lisa, but it's a good question. And I'm not sure which of these committees are going to need staff or budget. A lot of our committees that we currently run do not have staff or budget. So they just operate, they meet for no cost, except they use meeting space and things, of course. We don't charge them for that. So I'd have to probably talk with our finance director and figure out if these commissions decide that they do need some sort of a budget and can justify it to the council, then we'd have to probably create a line item for them in mid-year, or wait till the new fiscal year and build it in.
Yeah, that would have to come before us. And I know when we were creating the Commission on Disabilities, which has been created and we're taking applications for now, as Walter and Susan and a couple other people said, that, you know, the intent for the first part of this isn't they need money to do stuff. It's education, it's figuring out what's available in town, what's available for the state, the differences between. So I don't think we need to make any big assumptions that there needs to be a budget for this yet, because the commission hasn't even started and come up with their initial research to get information to anybody. So, and I'm going to go with what the people who fought for it wanted too, and that this is not like a dollar driven thing. It's an inclusive thing. It's an education thing. So we'll have to take that as they get developed and do their bylaws and figure it out.
Well, the thing about these commissions is right now they will be using resources. They'll have to meet on Zoom. And if we do at some point move to having meetings in person, we are going to have to do cleaning before and after each meeting. So there will be some expenses that normally aren't around for commission. And it's just, you know, adding more onto our public works. Sorry. So I also had a couple questions about summer programs with the library. Is there going to be a summer reading program this year?
I've been working on that. I have a virtual summer reading program for children and also one for teens and tweens. My friends group gave me some money for prizes for the children and for the teens and tweens and for the adults. So once I get to the adults, it's going to be something very, very simple. But yes, I've got some things going. I had booked programs in February, and unless we can do them outside, I just don't know that there are programs at this point.
Right. Thank you. Is there a possibility of doing programs on Zoom, like having an author talk on Zoom?
Well, certainly. And actually, I am, after this meeting, I'm going to my foundation meeting, and we're going to talk about getting the library a Zoom account because I could use it.
Excellent. That's great to hear. Thank you. And the last question we had, some people were wondering if they're having trouble with internet at home. Is it available to drive up to the library and sit in their car and be able to access?
Yes.
Thank you. That's what I thought. The next question I have was, again, it had been asked, I had asked it before, but some people are still nervous. We understand the food assistance program is for the breakfasts and lunches are going to end when school closes. There's a lot of families that are relying on that convenience, being able to stretch their dollar and relying on it fiscally. Is there any other plans? Have we contacted the state at all for any food assistance, during the summer months? I think I had seen Coventry just put out an email to contact Human Services. If you're still going to be, would like to be reliant on a program over the summer.
I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt. Is this like just in essence of time, budget related or like project?
It is budget. It would be budget related if there's a cost to the town. That's why I'm asking. Because if this is something that is not being, it could be use of one of the schools. If we're going to find some way to continue this food assistance program, it could.
That's funded through the FDA, though. Like that food program is funded through the FDA, not the town.
It is, and it's going to end when school ends. So I'm worried about the families over the summer who have been relying on this program and want to see if there's a way that if there's not an availability, maybe we need to look at something at the town level to provide this sort of assistance for our residents.
I don't think.
Yeah, I know. I was gonna say hi. This is Mike. I'm not sure Bev or Walter if anybody has considered that. I don't know if can anybody speak to the need or perhaps the future need.
All right,
Yes,
speaking.
The food bank is still open and you have donations, correct?
Yes, we are. We're still receiving them.
Yeah, and the fire department, I believe, is still taking donations also.
Yeah.
So when
And
the
we're
US
receiving,
program goes away, and you've had steady stream of people who have been typically using it. So
yeah.
that covers the food pantry aspect of this.
And we've been giving out food vouchers and gift certificates to local stores. But I think Brenda's talking about the program the school is running, and I couldn't comment on that. That would be Dr. Willett.
Yes, I've been waiting for my big moment. So we actually are part of right now kind of advocating. I sent out something as part of the daily bulletin today that, the U.S. Senate is considering another emergency funding bill for school nutrition programs. And that funding bill would allow us through the USDA to continue providing more of these meals. So that's what we're currently seeking right now. But it's unclear as to whether the Senate will pass that.
If a program like that goes forward, would we be paying for the personnel over the summer to provide that program? Or would that be?
Well, we get, the personnel are built into our system, and we would obviously try to do some FEMA reimbursement, although I don't know if that would get supported. We do have those personnel as part of our workforce, so it's a certain amount we get reimbursed for the meals that allow us to offset some of the impacts of those costs. But those personnel would be with us, hopefully, anyway. They're part of our system.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I didn't realize that there was a time limit on this discussion, when it comes to the budget.
I don't think there's a time limit, Brenda. I think we just, had meetings beforehand with the department heads. So we're supposed to be deliberating the budget rather than getting into the minutia of it. But feel free to carry on.
I take exception to your tone.
Brenda, that's like regular. You take exception to my tone a lot. So we'll just keep going on with the questions and get to everybody else.
I'd like to remind you that we did have a code of conduct that we all agreed to at the beginning of the year. And I believe that you're not following that code of conduct. It's very disappointing to me to see this kind of, the way that you act and the way that you treat people during these meetings. It's really disheartening. So I'll end it there.
Steve?
Just two quick questions. One was, and I apologize if we've already answered it. Does Mike or Lisa know how many individuals have applied for the tax deferment program at this point? And then just a quick reminder to people in the public, is there a cutoff point to apply?
Lisa, you want to take that? I saw you getting ready.
Yeah, we have 6 people so far.
Okay, that's the number, yeah. And then the deadline is July 1st.
Okay, and then the second is, do we have any projections on how many homes due to crumbling foundations over the course of this budget period that we're passing at the end of the month might be back on the tax rolls as we kind of lead into our next budget cycle?
Yeah, that's a great question. Should I reach out to Jason? Do you happen to know the answer to that?
The answer, yeah, sure. Thanks, Steve, is 0. We don't phase anybody back in. If you're on the grand list as of last October, then it's a reduction for this coming year. Anybody who applies now, and I have probably about 5 or 6 applications for next year, will be reduced next year. So there is no further reductions to the grand list due to Crumbling Foundation, and there'll be no additions because they get a full year reduction. So anybody who is fixed, whether it was yesterday or a month from now, will go back on for the 2020 grand list.
Okay, thank you for those answers. Appreciate it, Jason.
Yep.
Thank you, Jason. Lou?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to address a few issues that, with regard to our town employees, all the staff that work with Mr. Rosen, with everybody there at the town hall, as well as as the teachers and all the staff with Dr. Willett, that I think that both Dr. Willett, Mr. Rosen, as well as the town council have worked arduously to, one, show our appreciation for them, and two, to make sure that all the people that we have are gainfully employed throughout this COVID problem, that at some point that we may have been facing possible furloughs or layoffs because of the drop in some of the work that people could have been doing. But through creative work with Dr. Willett and Mr. Rosen, I think that we've kept everybody gainfully employed. And so I think that that's quite a credit to both Mr. Rosen, Dr. Willett, as well as the town council for working on that to make sure that we show our employees our appreciation and minimize the impact that this incident has had to them as well. Going back to now focusing on the issue of the budget, as the Birch Grove liaison and having been involved in discussions there are a few things that I'm concerned about with regard to the budget that's being proposed, and that has to do specifically with Birch Grove projects. I know that that's within the Board of Education purview, but there are two things that are included in there which I have significant concerns about, because that if they're kept in the budget as the way they are now, could create a recurring cost. That there's two issues that are on there. The cost of the security guard is at Birch Grove, as well as the moving costs that are part of the Birch Grove expenses, which are basically one-time expenses. But the way that they stand now, it appears that they are as part of the overall Board of Education budget. And as such, if we keep them in there, that they would be basically an enlargement of the Board of Education budget and be part of their continuing expenses. And so I have concern focusing specifically on the budget and trying to restrict it to this budget discussion. That I'm concerned about those expenses. And although I know that the Board of Education that they deal with their budget the way it is, I think those are two things where if the Board of Education saw it appropriate, that we could cut $100,000, transfer it over to our town fund so that the moving costs could be covered, as well as the security guard would still be covered, but it would not create a further encumbrance on the Board of Education budget and create a continuing cost or a continuing expense, which would increase our overall budget when this is really just a one-time expense for both of them.
So that was one of the things I had on my list too. There are almost $100,000 worth of expenses that are Birch Grove project related right now in the Board of Ed budget, that are truly project related expenses and not operating expenses. And the Board of Ed budget should be truly operating expenses. So if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're saying is kind of where I am on my train of thought, is that there's about $49,000, I think, in moving expenses and such. And last year we created the Birch Grove, what is it called? We created, I have the name of it, hold on. I double checked this, the Birch Grove non-grant capital account. We put $75,000 in it, and then there was money in there for the van. And from what I understand, there's about $50,000 left in that fund for unexpected Birch Grove expenses. So I would agree. I think we could reduce the Board of Ed budget by that $100,000 and not impact their services over there. We would just slide those expenses over to the town side, which is where we're tracking all of the Birch Grove project related expenses anyway, and keep it out of the Board of Ed side. It would still be paid for, it would still be handled. It would just move from the Board of Ed budget to the town budget. And the other one, I think that would definitely is the security guard, because that security guard was specifically hired for the Birch Grove portables and should go away when the Birch Grove portables goes away. And then if there's a need for something else, if they, I know when it was brought up, or when I don't know, when I brought it up at our joint meeting, Dr. Willett mentioned something about the SROs. And if I look at their budget, the SRO number stays the same. But if they need to add an SRO, that's independent of the Birch Grove project resource. So I would be in favor of moving that $100,000 from the Board of Ed side to the town side. So first of all, to utilize the fund that we set up specifically to do that. And then to put the Birch Grove expenses where they belong.
Yeah, I would concur with that. I think that as a member of the Birch Grove Building Committee, and as a town council liaison, I think that would be a prudent thing to do, where we still would ensure that the costs were covered, and that we would be able to make sure that that those needs are met. Since I believe that some of them are actually that the security guard was actually state mandated. And I know that as a member of the Birch Grove Building Committee, that we're discussing that with the state. But I think that's a prudent way to do it, where is to reduce the overall BOE budget by that $100,000, but then just basically picking up the expenses out of the town fund that we have and put it as a town expense, so that it would not become a recurring BOE line item. Let's see. And then there was, and then I just, again, since while we've been discussing these various issues, that I believe that 2 more emails have come in, again, stating concern regarding the senior tax credit, and that, again, that's something that's established by ordinance, and that our decisions have no, short of changing that ordinance, cannot affect that in any way. I believe, is that essentially accurate?
It's 100% accurate. We don't budget for the amount of money they have. It's an adjustment to our net grand list. It is not a budget item, and it's ordinance bound. We don't fund it or not fund it. It's a direct write-off of our grand list. So if that were ever to change, it would have to go through an ordinance change. It would be public. It would have to go through a public hearing, and we would have to physically change the ordinance, which I would be the very first person yelling and screaming about that. So there's no danger at all to Ordinance 60. It's 100% inaccurate.
I'd like to point out that we're making an assumption here, because none of the 4 people who were on that email or on the letter that wrote us have explicitly addressed which senior services they were talking about. So that would be making an assumption, I think, that, and we shouldn't be doing that.
I think it's an educated assumption.
Take a look at what Ordinance 60 is at some point, since the value has gone down, and see if we're just to make sure that we're hitting the right percentages, the right numbers, the right amount of seniors. I don't know how long it has been since we looked at that ordinance, but maybe it's something that we can open up and take a look at again if there's a concern.
And I'm sorry, I just, what I was going to be following up with another question, but thank you for that clarification. And I just want to point out that one of the emails specifically states that now you want to raise taxes and take tax credits away from seniors. So that's what I was specifically referring to. That is the verbatim language from the email. But the other issue that I would also like to address, I believe that at one point that the Board of Education had broached the issue of a possible contingency fund. I can't remember if that was
the joint meeting.
Yeah, at the joint meeting. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that's something that I would like to discuss if we can discuss it at this point, since that's something that could also be incorporated as part of this budget.
Yep, absolutely. Did you have any other questions you wanted to throw on the plate here, or do you want to just look at that one right now?
Well, I think that if we can address that, because after taking a look at it, at some of the possibilities and some of the requests that the Board of Education made in the joint meeting, that I would actually, if we are open to it, even move for action on the creation of such a fund. I don't know if that's something that would require a separate hearing or if that could be incorporated as part of of our overall budget going forward, since this is something that it's not really creating a new fund, but shifting some of the funds, the unexpended funds from the Board of Education into a contingency fund. So I don't know if that's a proper mechanism just to go through it as presenting as part of our budget here right now, or if it's something that we need to have a public hearing.
Well, I think we would have to look at it in two phases. So first of all, we can review at the joint meeting what we were given by Dr. Willett for the plan that they have, because I actually had a question on that regarding the $45,000 in capital, that we removed it from the capital program and they reduced their portion of what they were going to reduce by. But I didn't see that on the list of items that they're doing with the money, the savings that they have. So I just wanted to make sure that those capital projects were being done and they're not going to just disappear this year and then come back on next year or the year after. Because it seemed to me, the conversation, the intent was, we'll remove it from capital if you're going to do it, kind of a thing. So I had that question, but from the joint meeting, we had the list of things. Dr. Willett had the 1.1 million. And then there was $387,346.81 of prepaid expenses, $85,771.19 of prepaying for the health insurance. Then there were 4 items that they wanted to purchase this year that were not in the budget, and that was the $17,400 for curriculum writing, the $7,000 to redo Dr. Willett's office, the $13,000 for the Clorox cleaning items, the $38,000 for the telephone system. That got us down to $560, $582 left from the amount that he had, which is probably going to do this until they get to a final. And then, of course, they were going to make the request for $399,756 to go into the 1% fund. My dogs are howling now. Which would leave, based off of those numbers, my calculation of $160,826 to go into this COVID type fund. If we want to discuss it, look at it. So from what I understand, that COVID type fund would be to handle expenses related to getting the schools back open or COVID related things. I know we talked in the joint meeting that we would want to make sure that it was not used to add recurring expenses like no new hiring or anything like that. And I believe Dr. Willett said he believed it would be more for increasing hours on a temporary basis or overtime. Use it for, so I guess from my perspective, if we're going to use it for overtime or increasing hours or, expenses that we need, like one-time expenses, I'd be okay with a fund like that with the year limit on it. We could review it after a year. If it's not spent, it would go back into the fund. But I would want to, I know you guys had said with no regulation, with no restrictions on it. My only restriction that I would like to see is that it's not going to add to recurring expenses, that we use it for COVID related increases and not something that's going to add to the budget, like no recurring stuff. But that's my side of this. So I don't know how everybody else feels. Again, it's like 1.1 million right now, gets down to 565.82, 400,000 into the fund would leave about 160,000, almost 161,000 right now that would be available to the Board of Ed to use for a COVID fund. And that's, again, I don't know what's happening with that $45,000 worth of capital stuff. If that's in there or if that still has to be added in there, then it would get it down to 115 or 116,000. So how do we feel about the presentation there from creating a fund, something like a temporary fund to handle COVID stuff? Lou, you have your hand up?
I'll hold off. I'll yield the floor to Ms. Falusi, and then I'd just like to, follow up with it after she's done. Thank you.
Okay. Brenda?
Yeah, for these unexpended costs, I'd feel a lot more comfortable if we had something in the packet so that everybody can take a look at. We do have a number of people from the public who are on here too. And to just be tossing out numbers, it's a little bit hard for them to follow.
I can pull up Dr. Willett's his presentation that he had. I can put that on the screen.
Can I make a quick comment?
I don't know. Do you have any cookies?
I always have cookies.
Yes. by all means.
Just a couple of points to the good of the order. That one, there's been other versions since then because I've been asked to, and I do work on this as it goes along and as budget numbers get get further down the line, and we get better an idea of balances. So there's been documents after that one. And I could talk.
Would you like me to share that? Do you have it? Because we are limited by what we saw at the joint meeting. So.
Yeah, and they're posted on the website. I think up through 6.5, they probably are posted. The one that's coming up is in the latest Board of Ed packet.
Okay. Hold on. I should have that. Let me.
But even then, so there's obviously it can still fit within the paradigm of what you're talking about, but it's been updated, and the EOI stuff has been updated, and the other information has been updated to like now or closer to now. And the SRO security officer this year, we paid for it out of operating. Next year it's there, but I think Kevin Eklund had done a presentation for the town council where there was a discussion of making the SRO full-time. If you do that, if that was something that really was meant to happen or wanted to happen, which a lot of people have seemingly expressed some interest in, then you take on, it's not a 24-hour position. Now it's full-time position, full-time salary for police officer plus benefits. So you're right, your 45 is for a security officer this year, and that is in there. You could take that. Right now the structure is 2 24-hour people without any benefits and by design. So it just depends on what you want to do with the future of the situation. But this particular fiscal year, it was taken out of that, out of operating. We didn't have it in next year. It is in there. But if it comes out next year, we would just wouldn't have enough to reach up to a full-time officer with benefits and all of that. And that's fine. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. But that was part of the discussions people have had. And I know that there was a presentation for town council where that was I thought seen as a positive thing at one point or another. So it's just part of the evolution of that conversation.
Okay, so I have your thing up on my screen. I can share that, and then let me just figure out this one. Let me make sure. Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Okay, so if I'm reading this correctly, Dr. Willett, and if I bastardize this, please let me know. It went from the 1.1 million to 1.2 million.
Yeah, just keeping in mind that fluctuates a lot as we down, up, but that was the point of kind of the multiple releases, is that at certain points that'll go up and down in the next span of days,
Yep.
And
it's a river in motion here. So we're at about 1.2 million, and you're still looking at the 473, 118
right
for the reduction. Just a matter of moving things here and there to move them along.
Right.
This we know is what it means for next year's impact, kind of a thing.
Right. Following year.
Here is your 1% reserve, and then you still have the 17.4, the 7,000, the 13,000.
Yeah. Recommendation 4, the board did a approval on. So recommendation 4 is largely in process, but that's 75 of the total amount.
So this here looks like this is an ad.
This particular, as of 6.5, that's an ad because Edgenuity is a piece of software we could use to respond to potential online needs of the COVID pandemic situation.
Absolutely. All right. So is the 45,000 for the capital projects in here anywhere?
So the idea would be to have that come out before that budget balance amount is finalized when I do the final document.
All right, so that's going to come out of, it's going to be out prior to the 1.2 million.
Yeah, and whether the town council has discretion about the educational reserve fund under ordinance 86, chapter 8, the town
Yep.
council can decide whether money goes into it or not. Once it does go in, then the board has the, the rights to spend it as it sees fit through, in those three categories of special ed, capital, or technology. So, what the town, if the town needed a certain amount for its budget, the town's discretion is in what it gives or grants for the educational reserve fund once the transfer is requested, and or what is rolled over.
I can just elaborate on my opinion on that. For this year, I would think that yes, we would want to put the money into the ERF because we don't know what you're going to need from a technological perspective going forward. And this, I wouldn't be opposed to that. And as long as and with this 243 here, if that were to go into a special COVID fund, my only things, like I said, I would like to see that with, no new hiring or nothing that's going to add operating expenses. And then after a year, if you don't use it at that point, then it would flow back into the general fund. But rather than having it just go into the general fund this year, my opinion on that is that I would like to see us be able to use that if we need it to handle any COVID things that come over.
Yeah, well, and these are, the board will be looking at this Wednesday and kind of, looking to make its determinations roughly about, the exact places where each of the, things go in whichever shell we're talking about, but, or whichever section or area. But one thing to keep in mind, I mean, I don't, it all depends on what assumptions the town has made for what it needs to complete that budget piece. Yeah. So if the town needs X, then a certain amount Y would have to be decided to be moved over, and that might impact what is available for ERF or is available in other areas.
Absolutely, and I think I think at this point, so basically, if this is what if everybody who's looking at this on the screen, if Dr. Willett goes ahead and purchases all of these things and recommendation 1, and he pays this money to the health district in recommendation 2. Recommendation 3 happens well after the fact. Recommendation 4, this $75,000 here, if you were to do that, and this recommendation 5, basically, if I'm understanding it correctly, 243, 724 plus 399, 756. What you would be turning over to the town at the end of the year, if all of this stayed 100% static, would be $643,480.
Yeah, you're adding ERF plus the two.
Plus the balance.
Right. And I mean, if the town needed 500, for instance, to balance it, then you can't give that all to the ERF.
Right. I think.
So that's what I'm saying is it has to do very largely with what's going to be needed by the town at the end, and the board I know will be discussing it Wednesday. As you know, I they will decide ultimately where and what to do with EOI and so on, is as their discretion under 10.222. But if you need a certain amount on the town side to complete this, then there's only so much you can give to the ERF and things like that. When the money is transferred over at the end of the year, should it be, that ERF is at the discretion of the town council in its allocation. So whatever rolls over, if that 243,724 rolled over, and there was a request for the ERF for 399, it's at the town council's discretion where and how much of that it puts towards ERF or towards completing whatever's needed on the town's budget side. So there's a lot of things here that and the Board of Ed will be deciding what they want me to do ultimately with that recommendation 1, for instance. But keep in mind also that while I expect it to come in not so far from where I've stated, that that balance number is in flux until we get all the way to the
till June 30th.
Yes,
Yep.
Exactly.
Absolutely, I understand that. So I think I am clear on what you're saying here. I think like I said, with all good intention and intent, I would be so far, like you said before, I haven't sat down with Lisa or anybody else hasn't sat down with Lisa and Mike to look at it, but the intent would be that this 643, 480 would come over to the town. And then we would do with it if we set something up. Or now, Mike and Lisa, from a perspective of if we set up this fund for say it's $200,000 or whatever, we would have to do that at the beginning of next fiscal year or before the end of this fiscal year.
Lisa, do you know the answer to that? I know we were just going back and forth on that.
Yeah, we were texting. Basically, you could set it up at any time. If the money flows through to fund, the money will flow through to fund balance at the end of the year if it's left over, just like it does with the ERF fund. My recommendation would be that you set up an ordinance similar to like you did the Education Reserve Fund, go through public hearing, then you'll have to appropriate the funds to there. You could put whatever guidance you want regarding, it not being a continuing fund, an expiration date or a review of a certain date, things like that. And, what it's to be spent on or not spent on. And, there's a whole lot involved with creating the ordinance, but you could certainly put some drafts together. We may also want to have a legal opinion. We usually do when we create an ordinance before we finalize it. And so that could be done next year or it could be done this year.
All right. Yeah, I'm just thinking from the, yeah. All right. Anybody, Lou, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just an inquiry as far as if the intent is not to create a permanent recurring fund and that it's something that would just be of a short-term period where basically that it would be reviewed at the end of next fiscal year, and if it continues on into the following fiscal year, but it's something that's not intended to last forever, because eventually that this will then become, rather than an emergency fund, will be a continuing expense. Do we need to go through a public ordinance, or can it be something that is set aside as part of this budget hearing? That's my main question on that. So that's the first question I have that I don't know if Mike or Lisa would be able to answer offhand. If the answer is no, it's best to do this way, then that's fine. Then I will move on to the next question that I have. But I just wanted to know.
Sounds like, I was gonna say, it sounds like, Lisa, that's the way you would advise to do it, to actually go through the ordinance public hearing process, right?
I think it just documents it. It gives some transparency to the public, and if the council changes in the future, at least it's in a formal process where it can still be upheld if there's some changes on the council before the time is up for the fund.
No, Lisa, would it matter that it's a temporary fund? Because obviously, I say we put $200,000 in there, and lo and behold, the sky opens up and rainbows and butterflies come out, and we don't ever have any other unanticipated expenses for Birch Grove. I mean, not for Birch Grove, wrong thing, for COVID-related stuff.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that there's language in there that at that point it would then revert back to the general fund like it would have originally.
Exactly.
Kind of like a one-time, we understand, we have no idea what's going to happen in the next 6 months. So let's put some money in there just in case. If we don't use it, it reverts back. If we do, then,
Right. That's all the stuff you'd have to put in writing. And, as far as not doing an ordinance, you probably could get by with that. But then again, having the ordinance just puts some meat behind it.
It puts structure around it, right? And even though it's a temporary fund, you'll have to do like the whole ordinance and
right. And you'll have to rescind the ordinance or put the date that it would expire, and we can get more information from our town clerk if there's any other special restrictions in doing something like that, or our town attorney.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, I think that what I'll do is rather than pushing this issue. And since it's something that we actually have a meeting tomorrow, I'll see about drafting a proposal for a motion so that we can maybe possibly have it addressed either tomorrow and then put it down for a public hearing or
On the 23rd?
that
Yeah.
way. The second issue the second question I'd like to pose is, or the discussion I'd like to bring up is the issue of the fire truck and a purchase of the fire truck, since I know that was something that was included in our public safety budget, and that or a public safety proposal, which I think is something that based upon looking at the budget and at some of the funds that we have available, as far as that we may still be able to cover it as part of this budget without having to go to a bonding issue. So I'd like to address that if we can, and see if there's any discussion regarding that, because my position would be is that if we can find a way to include it in this budget and using upfront money, as we at one point discussed with both Mr. Rosen and Ms. Hancock, that if we can still do that and still keep within our zero mill rate and no other increases, because as many of the emails have said, they're concerned about public safety, and this is one of those expenses that I think is something that we can include inside here, but still to promote our public safety and ensure our public safety while not increasing the mill rate.
Hi, this is Mike Rosen, Town Manager. I just want, for a point of clarification or point of order, that the fire truck was funded through the current fiscal year budget for fiscal year 1920. So we wouldn't have to necessarily put it back into the budget to pay cash for it. It's, we have a funding source, which is debt right now, bonding. So basically, we will probably address the fire truck situation at a council meeting because there is currently a funding source. In fact, I think we had given the go-ahead to the chief in a previous meeting that he could start getting what he needs to get together to put out for a bid for the fire truck, and we'll figure out the funding source at a council meeting. So it wouldn't be built into this budget except for our debt projections and fund balance analysis. Obviously, too, fund balance, if you pay $750,000 cash, you are probably talking about getting to the closer side of 10% than you are currently. So something that we've put in the packet in the past about doing the analysis both ways, with the fire truck through debt and the fire truck through cash. I don't think we have to make a decision on that tonight because it does have a funding source already.
And we have to we had a public hearing set for that we had to cancel with COVID. So we reset that public hearing to discuss whether or not we do the general fund for that. So that's kind of, like you said, it's not really in this budget. So it can be after the budget discussion.
Right, and then just to also consider that if we do amend based on this new idea to have this sort of this new fund that we just talked about for education, then that would change the analysis with a reduced turnback. So we may not have as much fund balance as we had suspected or expected. So paying the fire truck out of cash, we'd have to rerun the numbers if the council decides to go with this new fund as well to see just how close to 10% we're going to be getting if we do the fire truck from cash.
Can I ask a question about the fire truck? This is Brenda Falusi. I believe the chief was concerned that the longer we take to bid out on this, the higher the cost would be. Are we worried that we're not going to get everything that we wanted to out of the $750,000 and may have to go over in order to get to the public safety we need? Or are we going to have to cut some of the accoutrements on the fire truck?
So
I thought John was already bidding. I thought he was already going.
Yeah, that was my point as well. I brought this issue up.
Well, can we just ask, John and Rob are on the call, John Lytle and Rob DeBica. Will you gentlemen, maybe John, can you jump in, please?
Yes, sir. John Lytle, Director of Public Safety, Fire Chief of the town. We actually have been waiting. We did get direction to go get the fire truck. Unfortunately, with the COVID, we did have a demo a few weeks ago of 6 towns that were able to bring their fire trucks to Holland for the department to see a number of manufacturers. I've also reached out to many departments in Talon County to see if anybody else was going out to bid within the next couple months so we could piggyback to save money. Unfortunately, I don't have an exact price right now because we are looking at, we've settled it to 2 main manufacturers. Now, keep in mind, when you settle it to 2 main manufacturers, we're going to try to build the best truck. We're trying to build a combo truck for the future here to save on money and replacements of apparatus. The current rescue truck that we're replacing is estimated at $750,000. As we move forth, I can tell you that I am looking at a price sheet right now just for the air packs, and in a couple months the air packs are going up from anywhere between a 1 to 4% increase. So you take a 4% increase on $750,000. I don't know where it's going to go, but obviously everything with the COVID stuff has increased in prices, as well as building and delays. So I can't get an estimate. It would be something that this community and this council and the management would have to consider, that if we do come up within a fast period of time with a set of specs, if you go out to bid, you will get different various vendors bidding on it? Or do we go to look towards something that one of the communities around us has already been trialing for 2 years and try to seek some type of a bid waiver to try to get a same similar type of engineering specs, which would save time and money, and take that route? So we did have a very aggressive COVID walk around, trying to meet the health standards as how many people were standing outside the firehouse walking around the fire trucks at different times. But we've narrowed it down to 2 different manufacturers. So I have not gone out to bid. I have not gone out to seek because it was still up to question whether we were going to bond it or pay cash. But I believe it was the go ahead to go get the fire truck. So I do not have a set of final specs as of right now. We just finished up the air pack specs last Friday night at 9:00 at night, because that's another major concern that we have in this community, that we are wasting money on replacing air bottles, and especially with the safety and the COVID. So we got a couple major projects on our plate. That answers all the questions.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Okay, so the fire truck we'll deal with at a next, we'll get it on the agenda for a public hearing to discuss it after we lock down the budget side of things. But while we're on public safety, I would like to propose that we, I know right now this current budget has the new firefighter EMT coming in April. I'd like to propose that we actually bring it in January. Bring it in for half of the year instead. If my calculations are correct, based off of the budget stuff, we're looking at a delta of about $15,000, which I think is nominal compared to getting somebody in here, having a new fireman and EMT. It's an addition of service to the town, but it also gives us the opportunity to possibly have more of a revenue from the ambulance and such. So I don't know if anybody has anything they would like to talk about with that, but my I guess my suggestion or proposal would be to bring that resource on in January. Lou, your hand is up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I would concur with that recommendation. I think it's something that in discussions with Chief Lytle, that is something that would significantly assist in bringing his department, which has been working arduously throughout this whole COVID crisis, that it would give them the additional personnel that they need, bring them on earlier than what was originally requested by Chief Lytle. And I think it's something that we can absorb without looking at a increased mill rate. And then again, as you properly stated, possibly bring in additional revenues based upon the EMT qualifications. So that means one other person to operate the ambulance. So thank you.
Thank you. Brenda?
Can we go over how this is going to increase the revenue, just so that everybody's aware that may not have been on other calls?
Sure. So right now our ambulance, John, I can probably answer this, John. If I get anything wrong, just let me know. But our EMTs run our ambulances, and our ambulances are profit centers for us. They're the only thing in town that actually brings in revenue. By adding another fireman and EMT, that gives us more availability to go on more calls. And when we go on calls, we get that the revenue that is generated from using the ambulance goes into an ambulance reserve fund, which helps fund equipment and aperture and stuff like that for the fire department. It's not a revenue for the town per se, as it's a revenue that gets set aside for fire department and public safety things. So bringing somebody on early gives us the ability to ramp up in headcount to be able to go on more calls and then generate more revenue for the fire department. John, did I screw any of that up?
Madam Chair, when John Lytle, Fire Chief, no, you did not. Just keep in mind that this is something we've switched our schedule the previous year. So we are now covering daytimes from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. It's been a goal of mine for the past 10 years. But my problem is I'm running short between the 6 a.m. and then at 6 p.m. because the other staff leave at 3 o'clock. So when I have a short balanced, you either have your fire marshal driving your ambulance during the daytime or your fire chief driving the ambulance at 4:30 or 5 o'clock at night. Similar to, hence the reason why we're going to try to build a squad for this town so then we can maximize our personnel, because the revenue is obviously bringing in over 450,000, close to a little higher every single year. So the more calls we do, it obviously relates back to the revenue. Yes, ma'am.
In a worst case, like if you if you guys can't get into the ambulance, then we have to pass it off to another town and they get the revenue on there. And it's a longer service to get to our person who needs us here. So this would help with that. But would this be helpful to you, John, to get them in earlier? Would that be doable? Is that something that, you would have to ramp up your hiring expectations and everything?
My overall game plan for the last 10 years of the community has been covering 6 to 6 with at least 10 people, and I can't do it. And I can't do my job as it is now, driving a fire truck or being out in the front lines, and even using my fire marshal to drive an ambulance like he did last Thursday to St. Francis, and he was gone for 3 hours in his town.
So you don't foresee any kind of problems like bringing them in early?
Negative. It was just all I can say is, and I'm not making a political statement. It was something that the boss, Mr. Rosen, if I can speak freely, he's the one that was looking to be budgetary, financially responsible, and pushed it off, him and the finance manager, because of the budget crisis that we're in. And I even said to both of them, if it's not the right time, it's not the right time. But I've been asking for this for 10 years. So it's one of the things where Mr. Rosen made that choice, and I don't want to be the dart on a dartboard here, but obviously any beneficials that we can. Life safety is one of those things where you saw LifeStar in town this morning again. So it's a tragedy that when we have events like this and we can't fulfill the service for the community.
Thank you.
And Madam, yes, Mike Rosen, Town Manager. I just wanted to say that was well said, John, before about the benefit of bringing on a 7th firefighter and then sort of your overall game plan for the town. I know that originally you had asked for 2 in this fiscal year, and we kind of agreed upon 1, but starting the position later in the fiscal year to sort of help absorb the cost of that over the time. So we certainly are in a philosophical agreement that we need to have more firefighter EMTs in town. The statistics show that there's more medical calls these days than there used to be. And we certainly need more, that 7th firefighter, if not more in the future. And also worth noting too, just since we're talking revenue, that if the 7th firefighter EMT position, or public safety officer, we should say, helps keep the fire marshal out of an ambulance, we can also allocate Rob to do more inspections, which is a further revenue generator.
Revenue generator, right? It generates the inspection permit, the inspection fees.
So thank you, Chief and Mike, for giving me the actual numbers. I understand that the ambulance is one of the revenue streams that we have. I was trying to get at how one person, because when I was a medic, we needed at least 3 to get people to get an ambulance out. I was just trying to get at why adding 1 person would help us get to those numbers. So I appreciate the numbers, Mr. Rosen and Chief. Thank you.
What we tried to do, Brenda, is there is a state requirement that you do have to run an MRT or EMT in order for that ambulance to drive down the road with the patient. So we try to hire firefighter EMTs only. Unfortunately, the last couple months with COVID and some other unexpected injuries, we've been down one firefighter for 5 months or more. Luckily, tomorrow morning, we're finally having our interview to replace the person that we've been down 5 months for. So having that 5 months down, you're losing anywhere between $5,000 to $6,000 a month, if not higher, because I have to fill it with either an EMT or a firefighter. We try to fill it with an EMT first. So losing dollars every single day that goes by.
I appreciate that further input. Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, John. So let's see. So things on my list were the 100,000 for Board of Ed, the COVID fund, the firefighter on early, and then the only other thing that I had, and I don't know if we talked about this or not, but in regards to the $600,000 use from the general fund, if possible, I would like to tap the tax stabilization fund that we created last year and do 500 from the general fund and the, but at this point it'd be 115 now to stay at a 0 mill rate from the tax stabilization fund, which would still leave us 110,000 in there next year, should we need it to stabilize the tax mill rate increase, considering we're going into this with a hole. So Lisa or Mike, either one, rather than just taking 600 straight from the fund, is it doable to take 500 from the fund and then 115 from the tax stabilization fund and bring that balance down a little bit? I believe we have 225 in there right now.
That's
This
correct.
is Lisa. Sorry.
No,
Yes.
please go ahead, Lisa. Go ahead, Lisa.
Sorry. Yeah.
No.
Lisa Hancock. There's 225,000 in there right now. And yes, you would be able to do that and alleviate some of the burden on the general fund. The impact is going to be the same. Having a 0 mill rate increase, you'll still have to make up funds next year, but it's just one more source without hitting all of your regular fund balance. So it alleviates some of the burden.
Right, and this is Mike, the Rosen Town Manager. I just wanted to also add, and thank you, Lisa. That was a good explanation. The stabilization fund and the general fund are both cash for all intents and purposes. So they both reside within the fund balance, except the stabilization is sort of carved out for a different purpose to smooth out mill rate increases over the more difficult years we have. So what will happen is if your proposal passes tonight to use stabilization fund rather than fund balance, what we would do we would probably ask that we allocate that 115K that you said and move over at the end of the year, any additional fund balance to offset any expenditures. So basically we would do the stabilization fund first and then general fund for any additional need of general fund. But for whatever purpose, if there was savings throughout the year or things like that, we may not need to do either fund. I just think, Lisa, I think we talked earlier potentially about what stabilization fund we could do within things, and just if stabilization we might want to allocate that first earlier in the fiscal year, just to earmark it, right?
Yes, that's correct. And then if we had excess revenues, savings and spending, and say if we didn't use any of the 615,000, then the recommendation would be is put the 115,000 back to stabilization and not use any regular fund balance.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Let's see. Is anybody else? Kurt has his hand up.
Yes.
Kurt, take it away.
I do think, Tammy. I do want to just jump in on the tax stabilization fund. I think this is a perfect use of that fund. I remember when it was set up. I couldn't think of a better time to have to use it, or maybe it's a worse time, but I think it's the apropos situation to use this fund, and I fully support going forward with that. So thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have anything else in regards to the proposal that Mike put on the table in relation to any of the things that we've been talking about before we kind of just nail down what the zero is going to look like? All right, well,
Tammy, I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand what you're trying to say, talking about Mike.
do we have any, like, we know that right now the proposal from Mike is the 0% mill increase. We have talked about a couple of different things here in relation to what the final numbers are going to look like. I can go over them if you want. Okay, Mike's saying yes.
Yeah.
So we had Mike's original proposal, which was using $600,000 of the fund with all of the expenses as he had listed and everything else. The changes that we have talked about tonight that we would have to go around and decide on would be, from my opinion here, reducing the Board of Ed budget by $100,000 and moving the Birch Grove related expenses, that $100,000 over to the town side. Would not affect anything. All the resources, everything would still be there. It's just a matter of moving it to the area that is handling the Birch Grove expenses. Second would be the creation, the understanding of the what we looked at from Dr. Willett, and whether or not we want to consider the creation of a COVID expense fund for the schools for next year with a time limit. Increasing the we have the increase of the head count in, but changing the expected hire date for the fire person EMT from April to January. Reducing the fund usage to $500,000 and then utilizing $115,000 of the stabilization fund to maintain the zero balance. The zero mill rate increase. That's what I have. Am I missing anything from anybody else? Or is there anything else you want to talk about in relation to the proposal and where we're going to end? Looks like everybody's kind of saying no. So if that's the case, then Mike, how do you want to do this? We have to, so basically we're setting the budget at a zero mill rate increase. We have changes to expectations from your proposal.
Yes.
Go around and vote on those, what I have here listed as 5 things. And it's still gonna create a zero mill rate increase. It's just gonna change a couple of buckets.
So may I just say, and I know Mr. Jones just put his hand up, but may I just say that in tonight's packet, there is a draft resolution that encompasses the 4 categories that we need to take a vote on tonight so that it can be published in the newspaper tomorrow and be all set for our public presentation, which is going to be held on the June 17th. So the draft resolution has wording in it about the town council reviewing the manager's proposed budget and making, or not making, but in this case, making certain modifications to revenues and expenditures. And what we'll need to do is, if you all could vote on these changes, we will try to, Lisa and I will try to quickly amend the category and the amounts subsequently so that when you vote on the numbers tonight, that they're going to be accurate and ready for publishing tomorrow. So I think we're going to need you to vote on the changes first so that we can make the dollar amount changes.
Right. So if everything passed as it is, I would see an increase of $150,000 to town government and a decrease in Board of Education of $100,000. That's where my head is right now. If they
You said 150 or 115?
115 increase on town government and a reduction of 100,000 on Board of Ed. I think that's where my head is, but we'll go around and take the vote and see where it ends up.
Yeah, we will. We will adjust on the fly.
Do it on the fly. I love it, Lisa. Excel. Okay, so let's go around then. Oh, I'm sorry. No, Steve. Steve has a hand up.
Hi, Steve Jones. I think Town Manager Rose already answered my question. I just wasn't sure if this was a separate vote or if we were just going to be doing a vote as amended. So I think that's been clarified. So do we need a motion to make these changes, or is it sort of just a straw poll indication that we're all voting to have this change made.
I would recommend a formal motion to make changes to the manager's proposed budget and then enumerate them again for the record. And then we will read in the draft resolution in whole with the amended numbers.
Okay, so do you want us to do a motion for each of the changes? Or
Well, we did just list them out. So maybe why don't we do it? I think we should do them individually in case there are, people that want to say yes or no to any one particular one of these 4 changes.
Okay.
I have 4 changes total that you enumerated.
I have 5. I probably broke one out into 2. I'm breaking the fund out into 2, so you probably have.
Okay.
So Steve, do you need me to re-say those, or do you have them from?
I might need to. I can do at least the first one. I think that was mentioned was in regards to a motion that would move the $100,000 from the Birch Grove expenses to the town's general fund. Is that correct?
To the capital. There's a capital account.
Or to the capital account. My apologies.
It would be from the Board of Ed budget to the Birch Grove non-grant capital account.
Okay.
100,000 for that.
Okay, so yeah, I'd entertain the motion for that $100,000 to be transferred over as mentioned.
This is Kurt Schner. I second that motion.
Okay. Brenda?
Aye.
Cassandra?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Lou?
Aye.
Kurt? Kurt, did you say?
Aye. Did you hear me?
And I am an aye. Lisa, that passes unanimously. I don't know how we want to word the second one, Steve. I think it's depending on the amount that the Board of Ed has left over, we'll consider creating do we have to do this one?
Well, so Dr. Willett has his hand up. Did you want to maybe weigh in on this, Dr. Willett?
Thanks. I just wanted to, I think you're in discussion before voting, right? Is that where you're at? You had a second and you're discussing?
We didn't move the second one yet.
All right, because I just don't want to interrupt your process, but I just want to be clear on exactly which things, since you're using a figure of 100,000 round, what exactly are you saying is going to be offset? Just so I understand it, because I do have to take that back and try to work with it. What specifically is that?
From my last recollection of your budget, I believe there was about 49,000 something, like maybe 49,847 or something like that, of Birch Grove related moving expenses. And then there was the salary for the security guard.
So I have 11,000 for packing. BGP moving vehicle is 4,500. BGP moving expenses is 14,000, and BGP snow removal is 4,368. I get a subtotal of 33,868 from that. And if I add that to, and I'm just trying to make sure I understand. So 33,868. And if I add that to say what's there for security officer, I come to 79,030. And so I just want to make sure because I'm walking away from this trying to, to build something from it. I just want to know exactly what
I'm just going off the last number that I had written down from the conversations in the budget. So I had it at higher than that. So,
Well, it's worth noting that this is Mike Rosen, town manager. It's unanticipated Birch Grove expenses in that capital account, also ineligible Birch Grove expenses. So that extra $20,000 or $1,000 that we just vote, the 100 to make it from 80,000 that Walt needs to 100, that may go towards offsetting another expense anyway. So you may not want to. It's up to you, but you all may want to leave that extra 20 in there as some padding, because I've heard that we have some unanticipated and potentially ineligible Birch Grove expenses for the portables portion of the project.
But that's not in operating, right, Mike? Is that in operating, right? Or where is that 20 live? Because we're taking 100,000 out of, say, the board budget.
Okay.
If that isn't live in the board budget, then that's, and so it's okay. Whatever's decided is decided. I just need to know what I am looking at in terms of what that offset was. So, if it's 100, it's 100. But I just
Okay, I found it. I have $15,000 Birch Grove miscellaneous expenses for occupying school. 14,000 Birch Grove moving labor expenditures for new school. 4,500 Birch Grove moving vehicle rental, 11,000 Birch Grove packing and materials expenses, and $4,368 for Birch Grove snow removal labor. Gets me, I'm sorry, I was off by 1,000, $48,868.
So you have 15,000 for, so the difference is I have packing at 11, BGP motor vehicle rental at 4,500, BGP moving expenses at 14,000, BGP snow removal at 4,368, and you have one other thing in there.
15,000 Birch Grove miscellaneous expenses for occupying school.
Okay.
I can send that to you in the page later, Dr. Willett, if you want.
No, I want to make sure I'm getting exactly what you're thinking with respect to what is coming out.
Okay, and then the salary for the security.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to make sure I knew exactly what you were referring to.
Okay. So that one, in regards to the COVID fund, is that just more of an intent from us, or are we saying yes? Like, I don't think there's anything for us to pass on that right now.
I don't think you can create it tonight
No, we
because I
can't
think you need to do, right. I think you should put that onto a future agenda.
I think we could go around and ask for a straw vote on, are we supportive of creating this fund dependent upon the amount of money that's going to be left from Dr. Willett's overage and what they're going to pre-purchase. But we're not setting anything up tonight, just to show the Board of Ed where we're standing on a support for it.
Okay.
So this is more of a straw poll and not an official vote. There's no motion on this. It is just, are you supportive of looking at the creation of a COVID fund with the money that's going to be left over from the Board of Ed savings this year? Brenda?
I'm a little unclear on the wording there. I assume what you mean is unexpended funds and not overages on savings. But I am in support of creating a fund.
Okay, Cassandra?
Yes, I'm in support of that.
Steve?
Yeah, I'd be in support of that. Just making sure it's clear that that's a specified fund and it's different than our emergency declaration fund.
Okay, perfect. John?
Hey.
Lou?
Yes, and since I was one that brought that up, I will I'll basically a draft motion to Mr. Rosen so that he could put out to all counselors, sort of specifying what my thoughts on it were.
Someplace to start. I like that. That's good.
Yes.
Someplace to start. Kurt?
I'm also in favor of this fund.
And so am I. So the straw poll shows that everybody is in favor of the creation of a fund, depending on the balance that is left from the unexpended funds from this year. Then I think, Steve, the next one would be to move the date of hire for the fire and EMT.
Okay, so yeah, that was I'd entertain a motion to move the hiring date of the firefighter, and it was to January 1 of 2021, just to get the date accurately.
Yeah. Public safety officer.
Or public safety officer.
This is Brenda Felucci, I second.
Hey, any discussion? All those in favor? Brenda?
Aye.
Cassandra?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Lou?
Aye.
Kurt?
Aye.
And I am in favor also. That passes unanimously. And then the last one, Steve, would be the mix-up of the fund. So going from the 600 assumed usage to 500 of the general fund, and then tapping the stabilization fund for $115,000.
Yeah, Steve Jones, I'd entertain that motion to use $115,000 of the tax stabilization fund and make the reduction thereof to the unassigned fund balance that was projected to be used for this budget.
All right, I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion? Those in favor? Brenda?
Aye.
You gonna make it? You okay? Cassandra?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Lou?
Aye.
Kurt?
Aye.
And I am an aye on that, so it passes unanimously.
You might need that medic earlier.
after 6. You can't have an emergency call right now, Brenda. It's after 6. Okay, so, all right, I think, Mike, do you guys have what you need now? So
Yep,
as far as this is concerned, the town council has just passed the budget
Modifications.
modified from the proposed budget. Do you have the new numbers for town government?
Yes. So what I'll explain how we arrived at the numbers, and then we'll just go through the numbers. So town government is now 12,372,640, which is the extra $15,000 from moving the firefighter date from April to January. Board of Education number is now 40 million, 17,290, which is $100,000 less because that's the money that we're moving to the capital fund. Debt service remains 4,600,000, and capital is now $100,000 more at 192,567. So that is because you moved 100,000 out of the Board of Ed to the capital budget, and now your final number is 57,182,497. And I just want to verify, Lisa, that didn't completely offset. Is that correct? 50. It's not 50,167,497.
Right. It should be
It's $15,000.
It should be $15,000 more.
$15,000 more because of the firefighter position that's going to be paid out of the stabilization fund for the
Right.
first. Okay.
So it should be 57,182,497 is the grand total, keeping the mill rate at 36.05.
Right.
Hey, Steve, did you write those down?
I didn't write every line item. I wasn't sure if our resolution had to read out every line item or if we can do just the base budget change on how it was amended.
Mike?
But I can write it.
I can volunteer to. Why don't I read?
Yes. Why don't you read it?
I'll read it into the record, and then Councilman Jones can say so moved. Perhaps is that we can do it that way, since I have the wording. Okay, so I'm going to introduce this motion for consideration. Whereas the town council has reviewed the town manager's proposed budget and has made certain modifications to estimated revenues and expenditures, the details of which will be properly incorporated into the total budgetary document by the town manager and director of finance and records. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Tallinn Town Council that it hereby adopts a fiscal year 2020 to 2021 town operating and capital budget in the amount of $57,182,497 to be appropriated as follows. Category: town government, amount $12,372,640. Board of Education, $40,017,290. Debt service, $4,600,000. Capital, $192,567 for a total budget amount of $57,182,497. Said appropriations shall require no increase to the mill rate of 36.05 mils. Be it further resolved that the town manager, pursuant to the requirements of the town charter, is authorized to advertise this budgetary outlay as part of the June 17th, 2020 remote annual budget presentation meeting at 7 p.m.
All right, so I would so move. However, I'm seeing Dr. Willett's hand up. I wasn't sure if he needed to speak on something or if that's just prematurely up still.
It doesn't interrupt your process, but I'm still coming up with 94,030. So Tammy, send me whatever you have because I have $94,030 and I just want to account for the full 100. That's all.
Okay, I'll send you that sheet that I have.
So whatever it is you're counting is the 100. I just need it. So I have $94,030 of that 100 that I can see.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll second the motions on the floor.
Steve, did you make the motion?
Yes, I did.
You did? Okay, and Kurt seconded? Okay, all right. So any discussion? Brenda?
Aye.
Cassandra?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Lou?
Aye.
Kurt?
Aye.
And I am an aye, so that passes unanimously. We now have a budget, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right, he's clapping. I don't know that I'd clap. So we've just done the approval of the budget. I would like to point out to everybody that the next thing is on June 17th, which honestly, I couldn't have picked a worse date, Mike. It's my 25th wedding anniversary. But on my 25th wedding anniversary, I will be giving the annual budget presentation, which will be the presentation of this budget for a public hearing. And then on June 25th, we adopt it and set the mill rate. So this is similar to what we would normally do every year. We would have the referendum vote, or we would set the budget, have the public hearings, vote, and then set the mill rate. In this case, where we just set the budget, we'll have the presentation, and then on the 25th, the assumption is that nothing changes. And at that point, that is the budget that we set the mill rate on. So those are coming up. Nobody, oh, Steve, you have your hand up?
If we were moving to item 8, I was gonna make that motion.
Take it away.
All right, Madam Chair, through you, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn at 8:27 p.m.
This is Brenda Felicity, I second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor? Brenda?
Aye.
Cassandra?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Lou?
Aye.
Kurt?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. Have a good night.
Thank you.
And, the meeting is over.
Be well.